Thanks for joining us on the Week in Review. I'm Paris Schutz. Longtime CPD Chief Larry Snelling poised to take over as the department's next superintendent.
I'm truly honored and humbled to be chosen by Mayor Johnson to lead the Chicago Police Department as the superintendent of police.
As expected, Mayor Johnson chooses counterterrorism chief Larry Snelling as his top cop, a rare consensus choice for the position.
You can't always go by the things that you hear.
Meanwhile, Johnson sidesteps questions on the unceremonious firing of former health chief Dr. Allison Arwady as the department now faces an uncertain future.
Republicans think that if they lie about something often enough, if they deny the truth long enough, maybe we will start to believe their lies. The problem is this. Here in Illinois, we have a low tolerance for bull.
Democrats' tolerance for bull might be low, but their tolerance for corruption is apparently sky high.
Illinois Democrats and Republicans go scorched earth at their respective showcase days at the annual State Fair in Springfield, while the GOP mostly stays away from mentioning Trump. Jurors get to hear Tim Mapes in his own words as prosecutors play undercover recordings in Mapes' perjury trial. And in sports.
Two, in the air, right center field. Robert back. It's a walk-off.
The playoff contending Cubs walk all over the bottom-feeding White Sox in the Windy City Classic. Just gets rougher and rougher for those White Sox. And now to the Week in Review panel. Joining us are Rob Hart of WBBM News Radio, Marianne Ahern of NBC5 Chicago, Mariah Woelfel of WBEZ Chicago, and Robert Scoop Jackson of the Chicago Sun-Times. Let's get right into it. Marianne Ahern, what clinched the deal for Larry Snelling to become the next CPD superintendent?
Well, you talked about him being a consensus candidate, and I do think that is the truth. He had been there with the department for some 30 years. There was even talk that Paul Vallis favored Larry Snelling had Paul Vallis won. And I did speak to Vallis this week, and he said, yes, he was definitely one of my top two that I would have chosen. So when you say, consensus, it's hard to believe because Chicago police, the rank and file, all of the components sometimes don't come together. But in this case, I do think they have.
It's a wide consensus. Scoop Jackson, did you ever think you'd see the day where the FOP would be in agreement with police reformers that this is the guy?
Not really, but I think the times we're living in, it becomes important where you look at his background and it serves a great purpose that nobody else on the docket had. The Inglewood background, so they're feeling he's going to be in touch with the community. He may be one that's willing to get his hands dirty. And then a couple of years in counterterrorism, a lot of the boxes were checked off, so I can't say I was expecting it, but at this time, it would not be smart not to go against him. He kind of fits everything right now that you're looking for.
And it seemed like the most important thing from everybody was they wanted someone who knew the department, someone who was an insider. Rob Hart, do we have any insight into what the Larry Snelling philosophy will be to fight crime and to get buy-in from the community?
Well, there certainly is there is agreement between designate Snelling and Mayor Johnson in terms of addressing the root causes of crime. But it's always interesting to me that every time there is a new superintendent, it always ping-pongs back and forth between the outsider and the insider. David Brown, the outsider, coming from Texas, and now replaced by a department veteran, and of course Brown replacing Eddie Johnson, who was a longtime Chicago Police Department veteran.
Who replaced Gary McCarthy,
who
came
was
from
New Jersey, yeah.
Good point.
We just keep going back and forth here, but Mariah Woelfel, Rob Hart made an important point. It's the superintendent designate. Is there any notion that this would be blocked in City Council?
Well, Mayor Johnson stood next to conservative aldermen at the press conference, and so that's an indication that he won't be receiving much pushback from that flank of the City Council. And Johnson still has the confidence and support of the many progressive aldermen that were elected with him this year. And so I don't foresee this being a controversial appointment. Johnson said himself in interviews this week he foresees him passing. And, as anyone who covers confirmation hearings know, these do tend to be less, fiery than confirmation hearings in the Congress or even probably state politics. You know, these are questions about what your priorities are, what your goals are, and then it's very rare that you see a designee get rejected.
Marianne, are you surprised that Mayor Johnson seemingly is going against his more progressive credentials here and picking someone who is an insider when progressives have been the ones that have hammered the police department the hardest?
Right, and I do think that he has shown that he is trying to be a little bit more middle of the road. Perhaps his chief of staff, Rich Gaitis, might have leaned this way in for him, and he's relying on his expertise as well as Gaitis having been at City Hall for so many years, having worked for not only Daley but Emmanuel Lightfoot. And that does give people sort of pause of saying, aha, maybe those who did not agree with Johnson, that he is someone that is consensus builder. That's the word of the night here, isn't it? But I do think that there is perhaps the progressives might have chosen someone different, but are willing to give Johnson the lead and let him have his pick.
And this comes as Johnson is about to face his first 100 days in office. Scoop Jackson, what's your review of this first phase of this new mayor?
I think he's been slow but strategic in some of his decision makings outside of dealing with the public health issue. But I think we have to give him time, and he's played it the way you're supposed to play it as someone who is new to this, who doesn't have that much experience, especially as an elected public official. So his first 100 days have been okay. You know, we can't expect too much. There's a sense of urgency in Chicago that we'd like to have things done immediately. But for a neophyte, he's taking it slow, but it seems to be strategic on how he wants to handle things down the line. He didn't want to rush into things, say, my 100 days are going to dictate how the next 3 years are going to be. No, let's map this out and do it smart. And I think what Marianne said was important about the consensus of Snelling. It's like, hey, look, you know what? Snell. It's like, I'm going to do something that everybody's going to agree with. It may be not the one I want to do, but it's safe across the board, and we can be comfortable with this. Once again, I think that's strategic, and I think that is indicative of how his first 100 days have been.
Rob Hart, strategic, or is he having trouble just getting all the levers of government up and running as fast as his predecessors?
Well, I will relay to you a conversation I had with a friend of mine, lives in the Northwest Side, wanted Paul Vallis to win, and was surprised at the degree to which Brandon Johnson has stayed out of the news. I mean, he's been the mayor of Chicago for 100 days. He had a very definite, progressive change agenda. And yet, once he got to City Hall, he has the reputation, but he is governing like a centrist. And maybe that will serve him well going forward.
Although he did get a little bit of news, Marianne Ahern, for the way that he let go of the city's former top doc, Dr. Allison Arwady, who shepherded the city through COVID, those very difficult years. It was done on a Friday. He apparently had his chief of staff go fire her instead of doing it himself. Was it an unceremonious way to let her go?
Well, she had taken us through COVID, certainly was a big face in the city of Chicago through all of those news conferences. When he mentioned it in his own campaign that he was going to get rid of her, I think people were somewhat surprised and said, whoa, what, really? Why her? Perhaps they would have said to the CTA chairman, hey, time for you, but not everyone saw that. However, there could be several reasons, but one of them in particular, she did shepherd having the schools get open sooner than what CTU wanted. And she said, hey, the Catholic schools were open. We had a live experiment going on. They were able to handle it. She does not regret that decision. He promised to meet with her. He didn't. And yes, by firing her, having his chief of staff call it Friday at 5 o'clock, cut off her email, take away her phone, not exactly the collaborative approach that he has been promising.
It does seem like there was some kind of vendetta there with the CTU. They've been very publicly critical of her for that. But Marianne, you did ask the mayor about that, why he did it this way. What did he say to you?
Well, he quoted Tupac.
As one does in this situation.
And I might know Tupac's name, but I really don't know much more. And so, really, and of course, by that point, the mic was taken from me, but I really wanted to do an audible of, What does that have to do with it? Yeah, those kinds of answers, which happened again today in our interview, in the 100-day interview, there are some, he's got some talking points, and some are off the cuff. I think the Tupac might not have been written down ahead of time, for sure.
Well, Marianne, I was thinking about the Tupac quote, and could you just imagine how Richard M. Daley would have reacted to that same question? The voice going up maybe 7 octaves and saying it was a silly question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So every mayor has their way of deflecting questions they don't want to answer, although perhaps Mayor Daley would have quoted Neil Diamond or something like that. Mariah Woolful, so what does this signify for the direction of public health in Chicago? There's lots of issues like pandemic, COVID, and then mental health institutions.
Yeah, absolutely. And mental health, the approach to mental health is another area where they disagree, Dr. Arwady and the mayor. You know, the mayor wants to reopen the city's shuttered public health, mental health clinics, and Dr. Arwady under Lightfoot took a different approach, funneling instead dollars to nonprofit organizations. And, you know, progressives have said we want this to be a public institution to deliver mental health. This really does put the pressure on Johnson to bring in someone who can carry out a lot of his priorities that involve mental health. You have treatment, not trauma, which is one of his main ways to combat crime and the root causes of crime. And speaking of pressing issues, Dr. Arwady also said in interviews with Marianne and with me that, you know, she was discouraged from speaking on some of those pressing issues during the 3-month trial period that Johnson has put all, you know, Lightfoot holdovers under, including the air quality crisis caused by Canadian wildfires. And so it is perplexing, the timing of this and why he wouldn't have a replacement.
Well, that's the thing. Isn't there some confusion about who's going to replace her at this point?
Yes, because I think the second in command has also stepped down, and so there's not a doctor leading the Chicago Department of Public Health right now.
And one of the names floated, his resume did not hold up.
Right, there was some alleged fudging of the resume of one of the names floated. Scoop, you want to jump in here?
No, but if she was a target, and it seemed to be like she was a target because he mentioned this on his campaign, it would seem in strategic, as I said, I think he's been, why he didn't already have somebody in place to replace her. That's what seems weird to me, is that if you were thinking about this for months, where's the next person? You should have had that in line.
Could this have been in response to something that had happened last week? For instance, the Chicago Health Board, this obscure public health body, had come out publicly endorsing Dr. Arwady. Maybe they weren't happy about that.
He told all of the commissioners that they had 90 days. They had 3 months. And the planning commissioner, Maurice Cox, he left 5 minutes before he might have been fired as well. He decided last Friday on his own to resign. And several others have decided not.
What about the CTA, Sharon? Because the CTA's gotten all kinds of heat.
I've asked him about it today, and he said, I'm still reviewing. Yeah, so we'll see. But
there wasn't a Tupac quote for that one?
Not today.
All right. Let's move on to some other interesting language used by some Democrats and Republicans downstate. So first, Governor Pritzker touts Illinois' progressive credentials and slams Republicans for quote-unquote BS. When he makes these incendiary comments, do you think he's trying to get the attention of national Democrats?
Yeah, it's a fire up the troops rally in Springfield at the State Fair. There's Democratic Day, Republican Day. It's an annual tradition. But at this point, J.B. Pritzker, it's very obvious, his eyes are on 2028, and he's already wrapped himself in the cloak of I am the epic meme governor, even during his victory speech in November, mentioning the Nomadic Warriors for Pritzker Twitter account. So he's very much performing for a national audience, and that is what the kind of blue routine was all about. But the question is, and we'll talk about this later when it comes to the Mapes trial and all the stuff surrounding Madigan, that stuff is still there. So if you want to be this national figure, will you be dragged down by things that happen in Springfield?
And it's so far, I mean, it has not been punished, the party has not been punished electorally as a result of what's happened with Mapes and Madigan and all that. Meanwhile, Marianne, Republicans, they returned the fire yesterday, although they hold no statewide constitutional office. They're in super minority status in the General Assembly. So how do they fire up the troops?
Right, and then had their candidate there who ran against Pritzker, Darren Bailey, who wasn't even invited to speak, although he is running for Congress. And everyone stayed away from Trump when Trump is leading in all of the polls.
Everyone but one person, Darren Bailey.
You're right. You're right.
Who they didn't want to speak there.
Right. So It is going to be an interesting, as we lead into now the Democratic convention and Republican convention in Milwaukee. We might as well have them both right here. And how do the Illinois parties play a role? What kind of role do they play?
I think we are all looking forward to those conventions next year, right here in our backyard. Mariah, what do you make of? I mean, these happen every year, the Democrat Day and the Republican Day, and they're firing up the troops, but there really are no elections right now in the offing. So what's the point of all this?
To rally the troops, to keep the energy going.
All right, well, and a few years ago, the guy that kept the energy going for Democrats down there was Tim Mapes. And now, instead of being at the state fair rallying the troops, he is sitting in a courtroom facing up to 25 years in prison. Quite a turn of events, Marianne. So the prosecution just rested its case in his perjury and obstruction of justice trial. Sum up their case for me.
Well, their case seems to be that their case is that he lied. We appeared before the grand jury. They gave him an opportunity to have immunity. They told him, okay, but you've got to tell the truth when you come in before the grand jury. And now he's asked hundreds of questions, some 650 questions. They say he lied on at least 7 of them. They painstakingly, in the last 2 weeks, have gone through and played various undercover tapes, as well as shown emails of Mapes and Mike McLean, the confidant to Madigan. These are the 2 closest aides. And while Mapes said in the grand jury, oh, I don't know that. Oh, I can't recall that.
Right,
I don't remember that.
And these emails and these tapes they're playing show Mapes and McLean talking all the time about these big things.
And even after Mapes, who was abruptly fired because of the Me Too movement, he still was in conversation with McLean.
So given all this, why stick so hard to this notion that I didn't know what McLean was up to when you're facing 25 years in prison and Mike Madigan is nowhere near power anymore?
Well, it's loyalty. I mean, that's what it comes down to. It's loyalty. This is a group of people who are loyal to each other. They are believers in power. They are believers in the organization. And as you hear in these phone calls and then see in these emails as well, everyone gets taken care of. If you get let go, we will steer money towards you. There was the one conversation about Alderman Marty Quinn possibly losing his seat. Make sure he has a job because he has 3 girls to put through college.
Or they took care of his brother, who was the guy that was accused of sexually harassing the young staffer at the time, Elena Hampton. Elena Hampton then came forward. This is in 2018 or 2019, I believe. She comes forward accusing Madigan of retaliation very publicly. And then part of the emails shown this week are McLean and Madigan and Mapes, these 3 old power brokers, paranoid about the situation they've been put in because of this Me Too moment.
One of the tapes, honestly, I thought, what are we, 1950? They're in McLean talking to Mapes saying, is there a woman? Not like, oh, wow, maybe we could promote a woman, that would be great for us. No, is there, the tone of the voice was, is there even a woman that we could trust to put in leadership? Yeah.
Well, and then they get all concerned that this task force they put together to talk about women in the party is getting too independent. They're worried about that.
There is a tape they played of Madigan saying, are we going to let them go on and on and on?
And the tape of McLean talking to Mapes as well, this was, I think, served to show how close they were and how they kept in contact after the allegations came out, of McLean saying to Mapes, I'm nervous about talking to Madigan today, upset with Madigan after Madigan ousted Mapes, saying, it's going to be hard to talk to him. I just never thought you'd be the one, to take the fall for this. And it just shows, how close and what a complete kind of boys club, that
Well,
that
when
was.
we're looking from afar, we look at this organization that seems to be the pinnacle of power. It's just this untouchable, powerful organization. And then we find out it's at the height of this are 3 men that seem to be very insecure and paranoid about their power.
Well, but they still believe that power supersedes law. And they just, there's an old school saying that when the windbreakers show up at your door, they have something on you. And those windbreakers usually have letters on the back of them, FBI, CIA. And in this particular case, they're wiretapping you. They're letting you know we have something on you. So when the FBI says to you, you sure you want to go down this route? Are you sure you want to continue to lie to us? And you continue to lie, that goes into the mentality that, look, the power that we have is going to supersede anything you could do to us. And they stay true to that.
But here was a guy, though, he was very smart about hanging on to that power and making sure, Madigan at least, that the folks from the alphabet agencies that work in Quantico weren't listening to him, because it came out in the trial that he did not have email. He did not make phone calls.
Madigan you're talking
Madigan,
about.
yes.
Right.
People spoke to him in coded language, and the prosecutors even said, this guy sounds like Paulie from Goodfellas, where the people at the cab stand always took Paulie's phone calls.
Well, and the defense next week is going to present their side of the case, and they already, I was there for the opening statement, said that they're going to talk about his memory. He's in his late 60s, and that Mapes' memory was just not as strong, and they plan to have a memory expert. So all of the witnesses that the prosecution interviewed this week, from Nancy Kimmey, longtime lobbyist, to former aides of Madigan, the question was asked of them, were you concerned ever about Mapes' memory? No one said, yes, I was, because Mapes is the guy that's also described as the one who made sure the trains ran on time, who not only did the fundraising, but made sure that whatever bills were called, who, of course, ran the Democratic Day at the fair. He had 5 jobs, not just one.
And maybe he doesn't remember those days at the state fair that I remember full well that he was running for many years covering that.
I'm pretty sure, though, Madigan is still telling him, stay loyal, I got you. Stay loyal, I got you.
It seems like it. It seems like although I don't know that they're allowed to communicate, but who knows? I mean, it seems like something is keeping him from saying anything else. All right, let's move on to sports. Scoop Jackson, how thrilling was that walk-off on Wednesday? Christopher Morel just burying the White Sox there and keeping the Cubs in contention.
You keep rubbing it in, man. Bottom feeders and doing it.
Not burying the White. They're not burying.
One game the night before the Sox won, so.
And they had a great first 7 innings. I was screaming in Cubs fans' faces.
It was a great first 7 innings. Okay.
Well, as Yasmani Grandal said, if they stopped games after 7 innings, the White Sox would be in first place. Look, I mean, speaking as a White Sox fan, I think buried.
I think everyone on this table is, except
for you, right?
Okay. Buried on Wednesday, not quite. I mean, the White Sox were buried on May 1st. Let's be honest here.
Exactly.
So, as somebody said, if they weren't 30 games under 500, that loss would have stung. But I think let's be honest here. The Cubs are going to the playoffs. You can take that to the bank. They are the only team in the National League Central with a positive run differential right now. And that's kind of the indicator of where people are going. So when it's all said and done, you get to October, the Cubs are playing some more games.
They're 2.5 games out of first place.
2.5 games out of first place. They still have the Brewers to deal with. They're still trying to get in this wild card situation. But as a White Sox fan, I'm going to bring this up to you. They have a series coming up with the Brewers in about 10 days. And if you remember last year when the White Sox were in the hunt and they had to play the Guardians and they got swept, this series coming up against the Brewers feels very similar to what happened last year to the White Sox. And the White Sox have not been the same since that series. I'm not going to just automatically say, hey, the Cubs are going to get in it. This series against the Brewers coming up is going to dictate what's going to happen.
And they're going to have to do it without their best starting pitcher, Stroman. How long is he going to be out?
It's indefinite because of the rib injury. They don't know. They have no idea. If they can continue to play it the way they're playing without him, depending on what happens in the series against the Brewers, I think rest will help. So if they can rest and still be in there and say maybe a game and a half out, maybe 2 weeks from now, then they bring it back. But only thing that's going to make him better is rest. You don't want to have him going too soon and risk making the playoffs and then not using it.
As a Cubs fan, this reminds me way too much of 1998, where it also came down to a Cubs series with the Brewers to get to the playoffs, and then there was that famous dropped fly ball.
Brant Brown, Ron Santos, great moment of broadcasting.
Right, but then the Cubs still made it to the wild card that year. So anyway, that's just flashing in my head. Also, we learned this week that Justin Fields is going to sit out tomorrow's preseason game for the Bears. That's the right call, right?
Smart move, especially after the high he had, playing the last game, 3 for 3. Like it was a big deal, but 3 for 3, and he doesn't need to do anything. The only thing I'm worried about is getting reps with some of the starters as the season comes into play. The more reps, the better, but you don't want to risk injury. You don't want to risk him doing something that he normally shouldn't be doing, and that's running the football and putting your body in danger before the season even starts. So I get it.
How do you assess what you've seen from him?
Not much. I mean, he's had three dropbacks, 3 snaps, and they all, they win.
But everyone likes to make stuff about practice. Like he was 7-7 in practice, and everyone goes crazy. It's practice.
Practice is a simulation. It's not the real game. And when your name now is going to be at the top of that whiteboard in the locker room, You know, everybody knows he's not going to sneak up on anybody this year. Every opposing team's locker room, right there, he's going to be the target. So it's going to be different. So there's nothing you can do in practice to replicate what he's going to face during the game. And I don't think there's anything the preseason is going to replicate what he's going to face in the game. So they have to play it safe. They have to play it smart. You don't want the same situation to happen to him that happened to Derrick Rose that we're still trying to get over, where he's in a game that he shouldn't have been in, and his career was never the same.
Right. When he injured his knee, you're talking about?
Yep.
No,
in
let's
a game,
not.
they were up by 20 with a minute left or something like that.
Let's not go there. Justin Fields, stay healthy. We'll wait till the opening game against the Packers to know what we got there. But I'm very hopeful. And you guys have been a very smart panel, but we're out of time. So our thanks to Rob Hart, Marianne Ahern, Mariah Woelfel, and Scoop Jackson. Thank you all for being here on this beautiful August evening, and that is our show for this Friday night. Don't forget to catch Chicago Tonight and the Weekend Review streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. And join us tomorrow night at 6 for Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, and then at 6:30 for Chicago Tonight Black Voices. And now for the Weekend Review, I am Paris Schutz. Thank you all for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and we'll see you tonight at 10 for Black Voices. Scoop, we should mention Northwestern. It turns out that Pat Fitzgerald is now going to volunteer coach with Loyola Academy. You think everyone there is going to be okay with this?
I think it'll be fine as long as they're not giving him a check. They just treat him like he's volunteering there, and his son's already there, so it'll be fine.
I heard there's another coach helping out there as well.
Yeah, it will.
Wanstead.
Yeah.
His grandson.
At Loyola?
His grandson.
Well, if Loyola
there.
doesn't win the state championship, then I mean,
They're plugged. They're pretty plugged down there. You know, they're pretty plugged.
They're known for their team.
I mean, Rob and I are Ignatius guys, but even we have to kind of acknowledge
Are we sure this is not some type of like backdoor Wilmette diplomacy that Fitz is at Loyola trying to win the people of Wilmette over to a larger stadium at Northwestern?
Well,
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm, and proud sponsor of programming that offers advice and strategies to enhance the physical and mental well-being of fellow legal practitioners in Illinois.